stuff. Well, we're going to be talking about circularity, we're going to be talking about hydrogen and charging and repairability and the challenges that we face in those specific areas and what we can do about it. And Jürgen, let's start with you. You're down there at the end, sitting on the first chair. We have talked about hydrogen in various panels and keynotes today, and some of the sort of direction of travel seems to be feeling that that's quite a tricky part of the new technical sort of spectrum, if you like, this sort of the available options. Tell us how realistic it is.
Well, listening to all the speeches today and the very good conference and the inputs here, I really must say that it sounds like there is the need for a second solution. Because for the electrification was, which is mainstream, no doubt, but it doesn't seem to go as fast as we want to. And from our perspective, it won't reach the 100%. So I think the time is now to start thinking about additional technologies, and hydrogen is one of the options we think is a viable solution for road transport, definitely. So we have the customer perspective. We talked a lot about reluctance of customers to switch. Change Management 101 is telling us, provide options to the customers. The willingness to transform their behavior is more willing. We talked about home charging. There are a lot of people who don't have a garage or a driveway and need a zero-emission solution as well. We talked about the infrastructure. We talked about grids. There have been enough studies that showed that two infrastructures, hydrogen fueling and electric charging, as a combination, are cheaper than trying to do everything electric. So why not use that? The rest of Europe is doing that. Korea, Japan, and also China are going that way. We can, of course, invest a lot of money and a lot of time in the grid upgrades, and we need to do that, no doubt about that. But there could be some relief if part of the road transport would be hydrogen. We've heard a lot about raw materials, supply chains, industrial resilience, and so on. Again, hydrogen technology is a technology that has different raw materials, that has the value chain basically available in Europe to a very large extent. So that could also, again, help us in that sector. Now, where are we? We as BMW are going into production, as I said in the video, in 2028. There are some products on the market, and there are a lot of projects going on with commercial vehicles that will be available in the next few years. And in one of the panels, it was said that, yeah, it's something for the 2030s. Well, the 2030s are right there. If we don't start now, then 2030 won't happen. And electrification, just to put that straight, electrification is easy in the beginning, and I already heard also that in one of the speeches. We've reached the early adopters and we've reached the early steps, but it will get harder and harder to do the rollout. Hydrogen is exactly the other way around. It is harder to start because we need the infrastructure to get it started, but then, that's what all the studies show, then it will be easier and it will be a linear cost curve versus the electrification, which is a non-linear cost curve because of the grid upgrades that are needed to provide the energy. So I think the time to act is now, and to get ready and to prepare a second solution for road mobility.
And it's interesting that BMW are launching this model in 28. Where would purchasers of those cars be able to get hydrogen from? Because as I understand it, there aren't many places on station forecourts anymore where you can get hydrogen.
Well, we haven't decided yet which markets we will launch the car in.
Oh, right. Okay, so it might not be here.
Obviously,
okay.
If there's no infrastructure, then there is no market. Very simple. There is infrastructure already developing, as I said, in countries like Asia. Yeah. China, interesting enough, put hydrogen. It has been on their agenda for a long time, in addition to the battery, but they put it on the 5-year plan as one of the top 10 technologies they want to push forward in the next 5 years. We've had a pilot fleet of vehicles since 2023, very successful, a lot of positive feedback, more than I even expected. And we really see it as an additional technology. It's complementary to our very successful battery electric vehicle portfolio. And it's not a competition between technologies. You know, in renewable energy, we don't say it's solar or wind or, well, you know, hydropower. No, we need all of them. And we think it's the same in road mobility. We need all the available technologies to move fast enough to get to net zero, as we just heard.
Okay. Now, moving to you, David, Head of Public Affairs in Ireland, UK and Ireland at Michelin. Tyres is your thing, and you've got a lot to tell us about.
Amongst other things, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I'm sure you've got a wide hinterland. But let's talk about circularity challenges. And I'm not going to make any circular tyre jokes, I promise. But it's very tempting. But no, tell us what you've been learning, because you've been really deeply involved in this.
I think, I firstly think about the challenges for circularity. I think there feels to me as if there are several challenges that I see mainly. We have political ambition. I think there's a challenge with political ambition. I mean, for years we've had, you know, environmental policy focused on CO2. We've had environmental incentives focused on CO2. And I understand that, but circularity is important also. I think, having said that, there's also challenges with the ambition of industry. I think some manufacturers, some businesses are less ambitious than others when it comes to making products that last a long time, making products that can be repaired, making products that can be remanufactured, making products that can be dealt with imaginatively at the end of the life. So I think there's, you know, that those differing ambitions can hinder progress as well. But then equally, I think we've got a lot of technical challenges. You know, moving to full circularity is technically difficult. So, for example, for a tyre, you know, how do you keep getting more and more renewable materials into a tyre without affecting the CO2 it gives off when you use it, without affecting the particulates it gives off, without affecting stopping distances? You know, you've got to keep it on the road. So I think, you know, there's plenty of challenges to be overcome, but the opportunities are fantastic.
And I know we've talked about circularity and sustainability a lot over the last few years at this conference. And how do you think things are going? I mean, are you hopeful that you're making good progress on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, strategically, the group sees it globally as incredibly important. I mean, we've got a lot of joint ventures. We've got a lot of subsidiaries looking at sort of the high-tech materials that you can get from end-of-life products, the high-tech materials that you can put in your tyres, and certainly we're hopeful of getting to a significant level of tyre-to-tyre circularity. Technically, we can't actually see how we can get there at 100%, but that's the aim. You know, that is the aim: 100% tyre-to-tyre circularity.
Okay.
But you know, we'll see.
What happens to them at the moment, then?
That's a big question. That's a big question. What happens to the moment? Terrible things happen to the moment sometimes, especially if you look at the UK. Our end-of-life tyres, because there's a financial incentive to ship them to India. So out of the 700,000 tonnes of tyres that end-of-life tyres that are produced in the UK every year, 400,000 tonnes of those get exported to India. That has to stop. And there they get burnt in very often illegal pyrolysis plants to terrible ends. So that's a real policy ask that we have for the UK, is to create those closed loops.
Okay, we're going to add that one to the list for the end of the day. Excellent. Melanie, Mel, you are Queen of Charging, Queen of Public Charging. And, tell us about, from all the surveys and the insights, you know, your figures and the data are very well respected indeed. What's worked well for public charging infrastructures? Where are we? And and where do we need to get to?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think we're very lucky that we've got hundreds of thousands of users using our app every month who give us lots of feedback. We do surveys. We've got this amazing database showing the profile of the charging infrastructure and the utilization of that. So we look at all of that, and really out of it comes three big things: availability of charging, the charging experience, and then the cost of public charging. So in availability of charging, I think what most people think about when they talk about charging is they're thinking about these high-powered en route hubs going for longer journeys, and that's what most people have in mind. And the good news is that EV drivers they want 150 kilowatt chargers, they want hubs, and that is exactly what is happening. There's a really good news story in the high-powered charging hub area. There's been 40% growth the last couple of years. Thousands have been added. There's now over 1,000 locations with 8 or more EV chargers across the UK. So I'd say on the high-powered side, of course there's more to be done, and as we get more and more cars, more need to be rolled out, but it's a good news story. What we've talked about today is a lot of talk about those people who don't have off-street parking. So point one is 60% of people do have off-street parking. So as far as I can see, there's no particular barrier in terms of charging why they couldn't go electric now. But those 40% of people who don't, we need to be thinking about what are the solutions. And of course, the charging industry has been thinking about that. And I think compared to the high-powered side, where there's an obvious solution, we know what's needed. And near-home charging is a bit different. There's lamppost charging, there's on-street bollards, there's through pavement charging, there's shared charging, there's local charging hubs. There's lots of different solutions, and actually a little bit different depending on what your location is. So where are we? I think it's a mixed picture. In London, often people talk about the great charging infrastructure in London locally, and I think if you go on ZapMap, you'd be amazed how many chargers there are. So there's a good provision there, but maybe across the rest of the country, it is a bit patchy. There is the local electric vehicle infrastructure fund, £430 million, which was allocated maybe 2 years ago. That is now really starting to move forward. I think the industry would like it to have moved forward a bit more quickly, but over half the tenders have now been allocated. So we should see, I think the number is 100,000 chargers over the next couple of years rolled out at this local level to solve that problem. Experience, again, this has really improved over the last few years. Yes, people have concerns that there's sometimes reliability issues, but when you look at the really established charge point operators, your GridServes, the MFGs, the Ospreys, they have got a really great reliable service now. And the days when you had to have thousands of apps in your pocket, contactless payment is everywhere on high-powered chargers. And there are aggregator apps, ZapMap, but other charging aggregator apps are available where you can charge for over 80,000 charge points. So there's a lot of really good progress there. Finally, on the cost of charging, I think this is an issue, cost of public charging. For 80% of drivers at the moment, so about 85% of all drivers charge at home, and then they use a combination of home and public charging. They are absolutely saving compared to an internal combustion engine, an average of, say, 6p a mile, including public charging. But of course, there is an issue for those people who are reliant on the public network. And they find solutions, they trail cables, they charge at the workplace, so there are solutions, and there's off-peak charging on street, so there are solutions there, but I'm really pleased to hear about the government's looking into that cost of public charging, because that really needs to be done, and I can talk more about that, but I think that's probably enough to start.
It's one of the most commonly raised barriers to entry, I think, for a lot of people wondering about purchasing an EV. But another thing increasingly which is coming up, Mark, is the cost of insurance. So tell me where you feel from the ABI's perspective we are with insuring an electric vehicle.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. And I think you mentioned challenges at the start. I think the challenge for insurance is encapsulated by insurers' claims data, which shows that an electric vehicle is 25% more on average to repair, more costly to repair than an ICE equivalent. And indeed, when those repairs happen, they take 15% longer than their ICE equivalents, which adds to cost for things like replacement vehicles that need to be provided, et cetera, et cetera. So why is that? I mean, the predominant driver of that is down to the cost of the battery. So cost of replacement batteries ranging from £5,000 to over £20,000. And that means it's more likely that insurers will need to declare things like total losses or write-offs of vehicles for electric vehicles when they're repairing them rather than their ICE equivalents. I would say, though, I think we have seen some substantial progress, particularly on things like electric vehicle repair safety. So I think that that's moved in a much better direction. And this isn't, in our view, necessarily an issue, certainly not an issue around the fact that these vehicles can't be repaired. It's more about a technical assessment and an economic assessment of whether it's worth repairing them or not because of those battery-driven costs. But I would say on a more positive note, we're starting to see an improving picture. So I think that gap is reducing between your ICE repair costs and your electric vehicle repair costs. So that shows that I think electric vehicle repair costs don't need to remain higher, and that there is a positivity there, but more needs to be done.
Is it skills? Is that one of the issues?
That's part of the issue. I think that, again, that's being, to some extent, being addressed, but that whole repair supply chain, having both the skills and capacity to be able to devote attention to what are going to be more complicated repairs or have certainly higher levels of skills or standards required. But also things like standardizing that battery damage assessment process, so that can help with certainty around what needs to happen. I think some of this is driven by, in a sense, a conservative approach from insurers to some of those claims challenges when they see an electric vehicle, because they don't have that certainty around what that repair process should look like. And so they take a more risk-averse approach and are more inclined to write it off.
I mean, we're talking about sort of the anecdotal evidence that people just think, well, we're not quite sure if it's going to be repaired right, so let's just say replace it. And that's what the insurers are saying, because and again, it's skill and knowledge there, isn't it, as well?
Like I said, I think that the skills have shown us that we can repair these vehicles, but it's a question of whether the right pathways are being taken at the right time to put that vehicle down the right repair process, but then also whether it makes economic sense to do the repair rather than write off the vehicle, and that comes down to cost.
Yeah. Do you believe that it is a bit of a barrier to entry at the moment, the price of premiums?
So, I mean, certainly claims costs will be reflected in premiums. Yeah. You'd expect me to say that, wouldn't you? I think we are seeing it does cost more on average to insure an electric vehicle compared to ICE equivalent, and I think we need to lean into that. But I think we are seeing an improving picture, and I think that the progress towards better repair is one that should hopefully make insurance be more of an enabler of electrification in the future. That's certainly what we would want to see rather than a barrier.
Yeah. So, Jürgen, what do you think needs to happen? What's on your wish list to make hydrogen a viable option for? Let's concentrate on the UK market. I know what you were saying, obviously, about it's got a better uptake elsewhere. But what would you like to see to make it viable here?
Well, I think a hydrogen car basically is the best of both worlds, right? You have the electric driving, the great acceleration, the silent ride, everything we talked about, but you can use it like a combustion engine car. You go to a gas station, gas up, 3 or 4 minutes, you're full, and you're 100% able to go again. And what needs to happen, I guess, infrastructure needs to be built out before demand can happen. That's always the case. With electric vehicles, obviously, a lot of people could start with just charging at home. I did it myself. In hydrogen, that's not the case. So we need to start the infrastructure. I guess what needs to happen in the UK is, if you want to be part of that transition and speed up the transition, then basically put hydrogen on the solution list and recognize it as a second solution and start building the infrastructure like the rest of Europe is doing with the alternative fuel infrastructure regulation in Europe that actually mandates electric charging and hydrogen fueling stations in all urban nodes and along the European highways in the European Union. I think that's a great model to get started. And then after that, the policies need to focus more around getting it into an economically viable space. But I think the hydrogen production, when we look at the whole energy system side of things, where we have a lot of surplus and so on, that we need to deal with long-term storage of energy and all those things, hydrogen will happen anyway in the bigger context of the energy transition, so why not use it in the transport sector as well?
I'd love to dig into that a little bit more. Forgive my ignorance. So you're saying we already have a surplus of hydrogen which we could be using. Is that what you're
Now we
saying?
have a surplus of renewable energy
Okay, right.
in
Because
the times when there's more energy available, and batteries can only take so much of that surplus. In Germany, I don't know what the numbers in the UK are, but in Germany we threw away about 9 terawatt of renewable energy last year. That's 200 tons of hydrogen or 100,000 HGV trucks driving all year round, right? And there will be more of that once we expand the renewable energy system. Because if I'm not mistaken, I think here you have about 50% of the electricity being renewable already, which is great. But the electricity itself is only probably around 1/4 or 1/5 of the total energy consumption. And we need to decarbonize the total energy consumption, right? So we need to build up renewables galore. And then we have this energy system problem with the fluctuation, the renewables being available when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing, not when and where the energy is needed. Energy transport from the north to the south. All those things, hydrogen can help, in addition to all the other solutions like batteries for short-term storage and so on.
Yeah, very, very interesting. David, you gave us, I think, the shocking stat of the day so far, which was the 400,000 tons of rubber going out to India to be burned. Moving sort of aside from what Michelin's trying to do, how about the industry as a whole? What can be done? What should be done? Do you see hopeful signs?
Yes, I think there are hopeful signs, as long as the whole industry and the whole of the policy-making environment sees waste and starts to genuinely see waste as a valuable product that needs to be processed here and can attract UK jobs and can attract UK investment. And I think for that to happen, there needs to be much more of a partnership approach between business and government right at the start of a product's life. So if you look at the EU, they're introducing the eco-design for sustainable products regulations. They're introducing the Circular Economy Act. And yes, they are being diluted slightly, but here we're still waiting for the Circular Economy Strategy that was meant to be out, autumn of last year. So I think both industry and government need to recognise the importance of harmonising as much as possible with things like that. And equally, they need to recognise the danger of not doing that, both in competitive terms and in lack of investment terms. That partnership approach needs to go particularly towards end of life. As I mentioned, those outcomes in the tyre industry are terrible, but it's not the only industry that has those sort of statistics. At our Stoke factory, we've just built a facility in agreement with another company that will take 10,000 tons of end of life tyres, and it will turn those into recovered carbon black, reusable materials, sustainable fuel oil, and heat for the factory as well. So not only does that reduce our CO2, it reduces our energy bills, and therefore it's a link to competitiveness. But it needs everyone to realise that financially it makes sense. Circularity just makes sense.
Moving back to the charging world, Mel, obviously the stats and the data that your Zap app have sort of managed to sort of accumulate has given us a very good picture of the situation at the moment. How are you working then with the powers that be to try and make sure that information can be used and turned into better investment, better rollout, better availability?
Better everything, yeah. I mean, our stats, our data is used by the UK government. So they absorb our stats and produce their own stats every month on the sort of profile of the charging market and using utilisation. And we also have we have created some commercial products where we work with various people in the industry, charge point operators, DNOs, local authorities, investment, to help them understand, what is the utilization? Is it better to have, say, 10 chargers, 10 ultra-rapid chargers at one location, or is it better to have 5 at one and 5 at another? What is the best investment strategy? And I guess what's the big message that we get from charge point operators is that they absolutely need certainty in the market. So, they have got, Charge UK say they've got £6 billion to invest in charging infrastructure. They've already invested ahead of demand. And so what they need is to know that they're very supportive of the ZEV mandate and want to know that the cars are going to come so that they're going to be using their chargers. I think it's really important for the charging infrastructure and related companies.
And in the insurance world, Mark, how do you think your members should be helping to encourage the transition to greener energy use?
Well, I think working and collaborating with others, including OEMs, vehicle manufacturers, to reduce the number of write-offs, particularly of electric vehicles. Clearly, we want to keep more electric vehicles on the road for longer, so when they do have collisions, that they are repairable, and vehicle design directly affects that repairability. I'm sure many in the room will be aware of the new vehicle risk rating system that's being introduced, of which repairability is one of the 5 main pillars of that. So that is core to what insurers see, because it's core to the claims costs that they face. So if we can address that repairability, then we can keep more of these vehicles on the roads for longer. And we would very much support Thatcham's electric vehicle blueprint, which was launched a few weeks ago, which covers things like promoting vehicle design that will incorporate things like simplified battery removal and handling, standardised accessible diagnostics of those batteries, and then clear, as I've said before, clear battery damage assessment guidance to enable that repair sector to really take hold of keeping those vehicles on the roads when they do have accidents and need repaired.
And are you feeling the dialogue is positive at the moment about that?
I think we've much better dialogue than we did 5 to 10 years ago. I know that there are probably OEM issues with the new vehicle risk rating system that's coming in to replace the old group rating system, but that is a system that is going to help insurers understand the challenges that are impacting their claims costs much more when vehicles come to the UK car park, and indeed that will be dynamic throughout the vehicle's life. It needs to adapt to things like over-the-air updates that we're seeing, to new things that will be released by vehicle manufacturers to deal with safety or security issues. So group rating is too old, was not being reflective of the claims costs that insurers were seeing, and vehicle risk rating is now coming in to really improve and transform that.
Well, we've had a really good whistle-stop tour around various challenges in different bits of the industry and the sector. Time for some questions from you guys. As I say, we've got an eclectic group on the stage here, so please do fire away. We have a question from the gentleman in the 4th row there.
Andy Latham from ChargeEd. It's a question really for Mark. The insurance industry has done an enormous amount over the years raising repair standards, particularly with the British standard that they use. Part of that is that electric vehicle technicians are trained to level 3 certification. In my experience, less than 10% of those technicians then go on to level 4, which means that they can repair the battery. What's the ABI doing? You talk about getting manufacturer data, you talk about the Thatcham electric vehicle blueprint and assessments and so on, but what are we doing to actually train the technicians to do the job?
So I think it's a challenge not just for our industry, but it's a challenge for clearly the repair sector as well. But we need to work together with them in order to have repair technicians that are fit for the vehicles of today and of tomorrow. So that involves challenges around electrification. It involves wider challenges around vehicle sophistication as well. I think that's a real concern. It's a concern, I think, that starts at the fundamentals of things like our education system, of things like our, how do we track people into the repair sectors and into that industry? How do we ensure that the right skills are put in place, rather than it just being a an afterthought at that repair stage and then to work back from there. So I think it involves much wider collaboration than maybe we might first appreciate to really build the building blocks of a repair sector that's going to be fit for the vehicles of the future. And in our view as well, an independent repair sector needs to be part of that. So increasingly what we're seeing are challenges where actually the independent repair sector doesn't have the skills, the desire sometimes, or the knowledge to be able to work on more sophisticated vehicles. And that reduces competition and can increase repair costs in that way, which then filters through clearly to insurers and to insurance premiums that people pay as well. So there are huge issues, I think, there to consider, of which skills around electric vehicle repair is definitely one, and one I think will continue to be a challenge, but which we need to work with others to address.
Thank you for that. Any more questions? Yes, this gentleman in the blue shirt here again. Lucky number 2 coming towards you. There we are.
Hello again. So this is a question on charging. So Melanie, you mentioned about utilisation, which is obviously quite a critical point, particularly when it comes to making the business case for CPOs. And as it stands at the moment, utilisation of public charge points, I think, is 16% for time and only 4% for energy. So with utilisation rates being so low, what does that mean in terms of the rollout going forward? We know that quite often a lot of stakeholders do point to a supposed lack of charging infrastructure as being a barrier for consumers and drivers taking up EVs, but clearly what we already have the infrastructure there is not being utilised, and the demand isn't there already. So what do you think that means for the next 2 to 5 years for the rollout?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, I think first of all, those utilisation, time-based utilisation, that is an average across the country, and what you find, there's actually some areas which have much, much higher utilisation than that, and some in corollary have a lower utilisation. So there are a lot of charge point locations. I mean, there's so many EV drivers here today. You'll know you've been at charge locations where they're pretty busy. People are coming in and out, and they have a much higher utilisation. So that's where the charge point operators there are they're getting, maybe they're not yet profitable, but they're getting towards profitability, and that's good. And then there's other spaces where the utilisation is much lower. And I think some of those are the sort of legacy charge points. If you look back 5-6 years, used to sort of have a couple of chargers in the back of the car park that just are not used. And what we're seeing in the market is over the last year, there's been a big change, a big shift from, for example, 50 kilowatt chargers, upgrading those to 150 kilowatt chargers, which are much more popular with drivers. So there's sort of a big shift. The CPOs are sort of driving into the sweet spot. But your substantive point is, yes, the CPOs have invested ahead of demand, but we are expecting, or we, the charging industry, are expecting another 20% increase in cars this year. So there will be more cars and there will be more utilisation. And there's a certain element, if you look on a local level, so there's the high-powered charging and then a local level, you can look at the charging and you put in, say, 5 streets of lamppost chargers, and there's very, very low utilisation. But then slowly, people start getting the cars, and then the utilisation goes up, and then the council goes, oh, should we put some more in? It's a little bit of a risk. Put some more in, and then you can see in the data that quietly that actually does grow as well. So it's, partly it isn't you put something in the ground, immediately the utilisation changes. But on a local level, when this Levi funding rolls out, there will be a lot of areas where there's charging infrastructure, but not the cars, but people will see, visibility is a big thing. People say there's no charging infrastructure. Once people can see on their street, oh, there is, or at Sainsbury's or at Tesco's, there is charging, that will start changing people's mindsets. And instead of going, I can't go electric, there's no charging, they'll go, oh, actually, I saw one down the street, maybe I can. So, it's a bit of a chicken and egg.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. That brings this panel to an end. Thank you very much indeed.